Imagine being told your entire life that you're too short, you're too slow, you're too small. You're not athletic enough, you're not strong enough, that you'll never make it. For most people, hearing those words over and over eventually becomes reality. But for Dustin Pedroia, it became fuel. Standing just 5'9" on a good day, Pedroia never looked like a future superstar. He didn't have the towering frame of a slugger. He didn't throw 100 miles an hour. He wasn't baseball's next physical phenomenon. He looked ordinary. Yet somehow, he became extraordinary. 4 All-Star appearances, 4 Gold Gloves, a Silver Slugger, Rookie of the Year, AL MVP, 2 World Series championships, and for nearly a decade, there wasn't a player the city of Boston loved more. He wasn't just the Red Sox second baseman. He was their heartbeat. Every ground ball was attacked like it was the final out of Game 7. Every at-bat looked like a personal battle. Every sprint down the first base line was at full speed, even when everyone in the stadium knew he'd be out. That's who Dustin Pedroia was. A player whose effort never fluctuated. A player who somehow made millions of fans believe that they could compete alongside giants, including myself. And that's exactly what makes his story so heartbreaking. Because unlike so many baseball legends, Pedroia didn't slowly fade away. He didn't decline because age finally caught him. His career wasn't supposed to end when it did. Instead, one moment, one collision, one damaged knee changed everything. Almost overnight, one of baseball's best players transformed into someone simply trying to get healthy enough to walk without pain. The trophy stopped. The All-Star appearances disappeared. The comeback attempts grew shorter. And before anyone was ready to admit it, one of baseball's greatest competitors had quietly played his final game. Today, many younger fans remember Dustin Pedroia as the guy whose career was ruined by injuries. But that's selling his legacy incredibly short. Because before the pain, before the surgeries, before the endless rehab sessions, Dustin Pedroia was on a path that very few second basemen in baseball history have ever reached. This isn't just the story of a career cut short. It's the story of a player who spent his entire life proving everyone wrong, until there was one obstacle that even Dustin Pedroia couldn't outwork. This is the tragic downfall of Dustin Pedroia. Growing up in Woodland, California, baseball was never just a hobby. It was an obsession. His father, Guy Pedroia, pushed both Dustin and his older brother hard from an early age. Practices weren't casual. They were intense. Fundamentals mattered. Hustle mattered. Competition mattered. That mindset followed Dustin everywhere. Even as a kid, he played with a chip on his shoulder. Not because he wanted attention, because he constantly had to prove he belonged. At every tournament, every showcase, every tryout. The conversation always came back to the same thing: his size. Pedroia wasn't physically intimidating. He wasn't going to wow scouts stepping off the bus. And unfortunately, baseball has always loved projection. Scouts often fall in love with what a player could become physically. Pedroia didn't have much room to project. He looked fully grown before he even reached college, which meant many evaluators simply assumed his ceiling wasn't very high. It didn't matter that he hit. It didn't matter that he defended. It didn't matter that he competed hard. They saw 5'9" and stopped looking. Fortunately, one school saw something everyone else didn't: Arizona State, one of the premier college baseball programs in America. Pedroia immediately fit the culture. He wasn't interested in being flashy. He wanted to win, and that's exactly what he did. By his sophomore season, he'd become one of the best players in the country. His bat-to-ball skills were elite. His defense looked effortless. His baseball IQ separated him from everyone around him. He wasn't simply reacting. He anticipated everything. Coaches trusted him, teammates followed him, and opposing teams quickly learned that there was no easy way to get Dustin Pedroia out. In 2003, Arizona State reached the College World Series. Pedroia wasn't just contributing. He was becoming one of the college baseball's biggest stars. By the time his collegiate career ended, he had established himself as arguably the best middle infielder available in the draft. So, surely, professional scouts had changed their minds, right? Not exactly. The same concerns never disappeared. He doesn't have enough power. His body's maxed out. He's too small. There isn't much upside. Imagine hearing those criticisms after dominating one of the toughest levels of amateur baseball. Most players would have been frustrated. Pedroia almost expected it. He had heard the exact same thing his entire life. Finally, in the second round of the 2004 MLB draft, the Boston Red Sox selected Dustin Pedroia. It wasn't a headline-grabbing pick. In fact, many analysts believe Boston had reached. But inside the Red Sox organization, there was a growing belief that they'd found something special. Pedroia wasted absolutely no time proving them right. Every level of the minor leagues became another opportunity to silence doubters. Single A, High A, Double A, Triple A. The results stayed almost identical. He hit, he got on base, he rarely struck out, he played elite defense, he frustrated pitchers with his relentless approach. More importantly, he never tried to become someone else. Many undersized players attempt to swing harder to prove they have power. Pedroia didn't. He trusted the skills that got him there. His confidence bordered on arrogance, but it wasn't fake confidence. It came from years of proving people wrong. Every promotion only reinforced one idea. Maybe the scouts have been evaluating the wrong things all along. Because while everyone else measured height, Pedroia measured production. And before long, the Red Sox realized they weren't just developing another infielder. They were preparing to hand one of baseball's biggest franchises over to a player that almost nobody believed in. If Dustin Pedroia thought the hardest part of his career was making it to the major leagues, he was wrong. Because earning a roster spot was one thing. Earning the trust of Boston was completely different. The Red Sox weren't just any franchise. They were one of the biggest markets in sports. Every mistake was magnified, every slump became front page news, every game felt like October. And in 2007, Pedroia wasn't simply trying to become a major leaguer. He was replacing a fan favorite. Just one season earlier, the Red Sox had traded away their longtime second baseman Mark Loretta. While Loretta had only spent one season in Boston, he had been a dependable veteran on a team that won 86 games. Now Boston was handing the position to a 23-year-old rookie who looked more like a bat boy than the future face of the franchise. The expectations were enormous. The patience, almost non-existent. Pedroia made his opening day roster in 2007. For years, this had been the dream. Every bus ride through the minor leagues, every scout who said he was too small, every doubter, it had all led to this moment. And then, everything went wrong. Through his first few games, Pedroia looked completely overmatched. His timing was off, his confidence seemed shaken, the game looked impossibly fast. After just a handful of games, he is hitting well below 200. In Boston, that might as well have been zero. Sports radio exploded. Newspapers questioned whether the Red Sox had rushed him. Fans wanted another option. Some called for him to be sent back to AAA before the season even reached mid-April. It was the first time in years that Dustin Pedroia looked human. For a player who had spent his entire life proving people wrong, the doubts had returned. Only now, they were louder than ever. Most young players would have panicked. They would have changed their swing, pressed at the plate, started chasing pitches, trying to prove they belonged with one big swing. Pedroia did the opposite. He trusted himself. The same compact swing that carried him through college. The same disciplined approach that dominated the minor leagues. He refused to abandon it, and little by little, the hits started falling. A bloop single became a line drive. A line drive became 2 hits, then 3. His confidence returned. But it wasn't just the offense, it was everything else. Pedroia attacked every ground ball like the game depended on it. He turned double plays with incredible quickness. He sprinted to first on routine grounders that most players would have jogged through. He dove for baseballs that had no business being caught. Every inning, every pitch, every play. He competed like someone who still believed he had to earn his job. That attitude didn't just impress coaches, it won over an entire clubhouse. Veterans quickly realized something about Dustin Pedroia. He wasn't trying to fit in. He wasn't intimidated. He expected to belong. His confidence was contagious. Some teammates even laughed at how fearless he was. He talked trash to established veterans. He challenged teammates during practice, refused to back down from anyone. At just 5'9", Pedroia carried himself like he was 6'5". It wasn't arrogance, it was belief. That kind of belief that comes from spending your entire life proving people wrong. And before long, Boston started believing too. By the middle of the season, Pedroia wasn't just surviving, he was thriving. The rookie who couldn't buy a hit in April suddenly became one of the most consistent players in the lineup. He sprayed line drives all over the field, worked deep counts, played Gold Glove caliber defense, and brought an energy that couldn't be measured by statistics. Every night, he looked like the hardest working player on the field. Fans noticed, teammates noticed, and the league noticed. By season's end, Pedroia hit over 300, collected nearly 200 hits, and finished with one of the best rookie campaigns in baseball. His reward? The AL Rookie of the Year award. Just 12 months earlier, people questioned whether he belonged in the major leagues. Now, he was the best rookie in the American League. But as memorable as his individual season was, something even bigger was unfolding around him. The 2007 Red Sox were built to win, with stars like David Ortiz, Manny Ramirez, Josh Beckett, and Jonathan Papelbon leading the way. Boston stormed into October with championship expectations. For many rookies, the postseason is overwhelming. The pressure changes everything. Pedroia didn't care. He played October exactly the way he played April. Fast, fearless, relentless. Red Sox fought their way through the postseason and reached the World Series against the Colorado Rockies. 4 games later, it was over. Boston had swept the Rockies. The Red Sox were champions, and standing in the middle of that celebration, champagne dripping from his hat, was a rookie who just 2 months earlier, many fans wanted sent back to AAA. It's easy to forget now, looking back at Dustin Pedroia's career, that his first few weeks in the majors were filled with doubt. But maybe that's what makes his story so special, because the criticism never disappeared, it simply evolved. When people stopped questioning whether he belonged, they started questioning how long someone his size could keep playing this way. Could a player who threw his body around every single night really survive in the MLB for a decade? Or would his relentless style eventually catch up to him? At the time, nobody knew the answer. All they knew was this: Boston hadn't just found its second baseman, it had found its heartbeat, and somehow the best was still yet to come. There are moments in baseball that everyone remembers. A walk-off home run, a perfect game, a diving catch that saves a season, and then there are moments remembered for an entirely different reason. Moments that make you stop and wonder, what if that never happened? For Dustin Pedroia, that moment came on an ordinary Friday night in April of 2017. At the time, nothing suggested it would become one of the most talked about plays of the decade. It wasn't October, it wasn't Game 7, it wasn't even the most important game of the season. It was just another game between the Boston Red Sox and the Baltimore Orioles, or so everyone thought. By 2017, Pedroia wasn't quite the same player who had won the MVP nearly a decade earlier. He was 33 years old, the dives were taking a little longer to recover from, the bumps and bruises lingered a little more each season. But he was still one of the most respected second basemen in baseball. Still an all-star, still the emotional leader of Boston's clubhouse. Still the player every teammate looked toward when the game got difficult. He wasn't the future anymore. He was the foundation. And the Red Sox believed he still had several great years left. Then, the 6th inning happened. A ground ball was hit toward short. Pedroia moved into position to turn what he'd turned thousands of times before. Field the throw, touch second, fire to first. Routine. At nearly every level of baseball, middle infielders perform this play almost automatically. It's muscle memory. Catch, pivot, throw. But baseball has a cruel way of turning routine plays into life-changing moments. As Pedroia stepped on second base, Manny Machado came charging down the baseline. Machado began his slide late. His left leg drove directly into Pedroia's planted knee. The collision was violent. Pedroia crumpled immediately. There was no dramatic roll, no angry confrontation, just pain. Pure, unmistakable pain. Pedroia stayed on the ground. He eventually walked off under his own power, but something wasn't right. Everyone can see it. At first, it didn't seem catastrophic. Pedroia missed a little time. There was optimism that rest would solve the problem. After all, baseball players deal with injuries constantly. A sore knee wasn't supposed to end a Hall of Fame caliber career. But this wasn't just a sore knee. The collision had damaged cartilage that Pedroia had already been managing for years. The slide didn't create every problem, but it made existing damage dramatically worse. And cartilage, unlike muscles or ligaments, doesn't simply grow back. Almost immediately, the debate exploded. Was Machado's slide dirty? Was it legal? Was it reckless? Players, fans, analysts, everyone had an opinion. The collision became one of the biggest stories in baseball. Many Red Sox fans were furious. To them, it looked obvious. Pedroia was vulnerable, Machado slid late, the contact was unnecessary. Others argued the opposite. They believed it was simply an aggressive baseball play, an unfortunate accident, nothing more. Even today, years later, people still disagree. Perhaps the most surprising reaction came from Dustin Pedroia himself. Instead of publicly attacking Machado, he defended him. After the game, cameras caught Pedroia saying something that stunned many fans. "That's not me. He didn't want retaliation. He didn't want revenge. He didn't want a benches-clearing brawl fought in his name." Pedroia believed baseball should police itself through respect, not emotion. That response perfectly captured who he was. He wasn't interested in headlines. He just wanted to play baseball again. Unfortunately, that would prove far more difficult than anyone imagined. Pedroia returned later that season, but something had changed. The explosiveness wasn't there. The quick first step that had made him one of the baseball's greatest defenders looked just a little slower. The pain never truly disappeared. Every game required treatment. Every off day became another rehab session. Every morning started with the same question: can my knee handle today? Then came the surgeries. One became two. Two became more. Doctors searched for solutions. Rehabilitation programs changed. Strengthening exercise evolved. Nothing worked. The cartilage damage refused to cooperate. For a player whose game depended entirely on quickness, even losing half a step made an enormous difference. Pedroia wasn't a power hitter who could survive by standing in the batter's box. He needed his legs. He needed lateral movement. He needed to explode towards ground balls. Without that, he simply wasn't Dustin Pedroia anymore. Still, he refused to quit. There was never an option. Every offseason brought another comeback attempt. Every spring training carried a renewed optimism. Every interview sounded the same. I feel better. I'm making progress. I'll be back. And every time, baseball fans wanted to believe him. Because if there was anyone capable of beating impossible odds, it was Dustin Pedroia. This was the same player who had spent his entire life proving people wrong. Maybe, just maybe, he'd do it one more time. But reality can be cruel. Pedroia appeared in only 3 games during the 2018 season. 3. The following year, he managed just 6. 6 games. That's all. One of baseball's greatest competitors had become trapped inside a body that simply refused to cooperate. Every attempt to ramp up baseball activities ended the same way. Swelling, pain, setback, rehab, repeat. It became an endless cycle. Not because Pedroia lacked determination. If anything, he may have worked harder than ever, but determination can only take you so far when your body stops responding. Imagine spending your entire life believing that hard work solves every problem, every challenge, every obstacle. Then suddenly discovering that one problem that effort alone can't fix. That's what made this chapter of Pedroia's career so heartbreaking. He hadn't lost his love for baseball. He hadn't stopped caring. His body simply stopped allowing him to play the game the way he'd always played it. And for someone whose identity was built around competing, that realization had to have been devastating. Eventually, the comeback attempts became less frequent. The updates became quieter. The hope became harder to hold on to. There was no dramatic farewell game, no emotional final at-bat, no standing ovation after announcing his retirement. Instead, one of the greatest second basemen of this generation slowly disappeared from the lineup. His final major league game came in 2019. At the time, almost nobody realized it would be his last, because everyone, including Pedroia himself, still believed another comeback was possible. It never came. Years later, Pedroia would officially step away from baseball. Not because he wanted to, because there was nothing left to fight. And that's the cruelest part of his story. Baseball didn't defeat Dustin Pedroia. Age didn't defeat Dustin Pedroia. The critics who called him too small didn't defeat Dustin Pedroia. The one battle he couldn't win. The battle was against his own knee. A battle that began with one slide, one split-second collision. One moment that forever changed the course of an extraordinary career. One of the saddest things about sports is how quickly people forget. The game keeps moving, new stars arrive, new rivalries form, new champions are crowned. And slowly, even players who once felt larger than life begin to fade from the conversation. For younger baseball fans, Dustin Pedroia is often remembered for one thing: the injury, the surgeries, the failed comeback attempts, the end. But if that's all you remember, you miss the player he truly was. When Pedroia officially stepped away from baseball, his final stat line looked impressive. Over 1,800 hits, 140 home runs, an MVP award, Rookie of the Year, 4 Gold Gloves, a Silver Slugger, 4 All-Star appearances, 2 World Series championships. For almost any player, that resume would be extraordinary. But Pedroia's story has always been about more than numbers, because the numbers only tell you what he accomplished. They don't explain how he accomplished it. He wasn't the biggest player. He wasn't the strongest. He wasn't the fastest. He didn't possess a once-in-a-generation arm. He didn't hit baseball's 500 feet. He wasn't built like the superstars baseball usually celebrates. Instead, he built his career on things that don't always appear in a box score: preparation, instinct, leadership, relentless effort, confidence. The belief that no matter who stood across from him, he belonged. That belief became contagious. Walk into Red Sox clubhouse during Pedroia's prime, and teammates constantly talked about the same thing. Not his stats, not his competitiveness. Every practice mattered. Every drill mattered. Every inning mattered. If there was a way to compete, Pedroia found it. Whether it was taking extra ground balls after practice, studying opposing pitchers late into the night, or sprinting to first base on a routine ground ball in the 8th inning of a game Boston was already winning. He played every pitch like it could decide a championship. That's incredibly rare. It's why Boston didn't simply admire Dustin Pedroia. They loved him. Fenway Park has seen some of the greatest baseball players in history. Ted Williams, Carl Yastrzemski, David Ortiz. Those players became legends because of what they accomplished. Pedroia became a legend because of how he made people feel. Fans saw themselves in him. He wasn't physically gifted in ways most people could never imagine. He looked normal, which somehow made everything he accomplished feel even more incredible. He proved that greatness doesn't always arrive in the biggest body. Sometimes it arrives wearing dirt on his jersey. And then there's the question every baseball fan eventually asks. What if? What if the collision never happened? Would Dustin Pedroia be in the Hall of Fame? It's impossible to answer with certainty, but it's impossible not to wonder. When the injury occurred, Pedroia was still producing at a high level. He wasn't hanging on. He wasn't a shell of himself. He was still one of the better second basemen in the AL. History tells us that players with his skill set often age well. His game wasn't built around raw speed or overwhelming power. It was built around baseball intelligence, elite defense, elite contact, elite instincts. Those traits don't disappear overnight. If Pedroia had stayed healthy, it's reasonable to believe that he could have added several more productive seasons. Maybe another All-Star appearance, 2,000 hits, another Gold Glove, maybe another World Series run. Would that have been enough for Cooperstown? No one knows, but the conversation would almost certainly look different than it does today. Ironically, the same style of baseball that made Dustin Pedroia great may have also shortened his career. He never knew how to slow down. He never took plays off. He never protected his body. Every dive was full effort. Every slide was aggressive. Every sprint was max speed. That's why fans loved him. And it's also why watching the end hurt so much, because you couldn't help but feel that baseball had taken away someone who still had more to give. Yet maybe, just maybe, we've been asking the wrong question all along. Maybe the question isn't, would Dustin Pedroia have made the Hall of Fame? The better question would be, why does he need a plaque to validate what everyone who watched him already knows? Ask Red Sox fans who their favorite player was during that era. You'll hear Dustin Pedroia's name constantly. Not because he hit the most home runs, not because he won the most awards, because he represented everything they wanted baseball to be. Hard, honest, fearless, unselfish. He earned every ounce of respect he received. Years from now, baseball fans will continue debating the greatest second baseman of all time. Some discussions will focus on championships, others on stats, others on longevity. Pedroia's career may not check every historical box, but for nearly a decade, there were very few players in baseball you'd rather have on your team, and perhaps the greatest compliment any player can receive. When Dustin Pedroia finally retired, there wasn't a dramatic farewell tour. There wasn't one final standing ovation with a packed stadium knowing it was goodbye. Instead, his career quietly slipped away, almost without anyone realizing the final chapter had already been written. Maybe that's fitting, because Pedroia was never interested in attention. He wasn't chasing headlines. He wasn't trying to become baseball's biggest celebrity. He just wanted to play, compete, to win. And for nearly 15 years, that's exactly what he did.
Special. He treated the game with so much respect, and he played the game with every ounce of energy he had. I don't think it should be any surprise that some of his best plays he ever made, they were with the game on the line. That was just the kind of guy he was. He could raise the level of his game at the most opportune times. He was so.
Maybe Dustin Pedroia's career isn't tragic because it ended early. Maybe it's tragic because it reminds us of something every sports fan eventually learns. Talent doesn't guarantee longevity. Heart doesn't make you indestructible. Hard work can't heal every injury. Sometimes, even the toughest competitors lose battles they never deserved to fight. For years, Dustin Pedroia proved every scout wrong, every critic wrong, every person who said he'd be too small wrong. He reached the very top of baseball, not because he was the most gifted player on the field, but because no one was willing to outwork him. And in doing so, he became something far greater than an MVP. He became the standard. The player coaches pointed to when teaching young kids how to play the game. The player teammates trusted when everything was on the line. The player an entire city embraced because every night he played as if he putting on a Red Sox uniform was the greatest privilege in the world. His careers didn't end the way anyone wanted. Not the fans, not the Red Sox, and certainly not him. But maybe that's why people still talk about him. Because while stats fade and trophies gather dust, the way a player makes you feel lasts forever. And Dustin Pedroia made baseball fans believe that heart could overcome anything. For almost an entire career, it did. Until one day, it couldn't. And that's why Dustin Pedroia's story isn't remembered because of the way it ended. It's remembered because of everything that came before it. Sometimes the greatest players aren't the biggest names in history. They're the ones whose absence you still feel long after they leave the game.